do it on
I love it.
Welcome back to Colombian Influence. This is the book club series, chapter 7 of the Primal Wound.
I'm ready. Sorry, I wasn't ready, but this is what we're reading by Nancy Newton Verrier. And like Erica said, we are diving into chapter 7. This chapter is titled Issues of Rejection, Trust, Intimacy, and Loyalty. So,
getting raw about who we are.
We're getting raw here today. So let's, I suppose, dive in. This chapter is broken down into a lot fewer sections than the past chapters, actually. I noticed that breaking this down.
But like mini sections in the sections.
Yeah, a lot of subsections.
That's what it's called.
Yeah,
I like
whatever.
mini sections, but that's fine.
Basically, the larger sections that we're going to be going through is difficulties in relationships, fear of rejection, issues of trust and intimacy, and loyalty. So very much similar to the title of the chapter, but we'll go into the subsections that we mentioned as well and talk about each of them. I'm curious if you had, in this first section, basically is going into difficulties in relationships.
I had nothing.
You had no.
So bring it on.
I'm not even surprised.
Let's go.
Okay, so what does that say about our lives? Anyway, I guess with this first entire paragraph,
here we go again with the first page being like,
I know, first page, I'm like, oh no. I guess one thing I noticed when reading this is that we were reading this separately about a year ago or so, and just kind of each taking notes separately, give or take, kind of here and there. And there was nothing noted a year ago in this section, but this year when reading it, there is a lot to be noted. So life is changing. Overall, this first section of the book, Difficulties in Relationships, was really eye-opening to me. And it's basically described how adoptees perceive separation versus a non-adoptee, bringing me to the first quote, saying, "It has to do with the triggering of archaic memory traces of the original abandonment and the life-threatening experience that it was." So essentially having short separations to non-adoptees doesn't cause panic the same way that it does for adoptees, because there's not the idea of it being like this permanent thing. And I think that just really rang true to me as far as something that I just really understood, just saying how it was life-threatening. So I think that's kind of where it instills the panic, within adoptees. So exactly. I thought that was really interesting. That's really as much for that first section that I got, but I just thought it was really interesting that I didn't have any underlines last year, and this year I was like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. In that first section, it just says that going into therapy and saying they're going in to talk about their adoption issues is very uncommon. Very few people do that. And they say if they do that, it's a very big step because it means that the denial has been pierced, which literally a year ago when I started therapy with my current therapist is what happened. I went in and I was like, I'm realizing I'm 27. I've never talked to a therapist about this in depth. And it's like, that was, I don't know, I guess reading this was really like, oh, that was a moment. Yeah. That was like a really big thing that clearly is a shift. And I mean, I guess given how life has gone in the last year, it kind of makes sense.
Right, exactly. And just understanding adoption as an adoptee is something we're continually navigating. So that's very interesting that it was just the first time after all of those years of all of these things going on that you finally brought it to the surface.
Yeah, brought it to the forefront.
Exactly.
Also. So, okay, so that's that first section. Second section then for fear of rejection is really what you and I have the most information or the most underlined kind of details. Do you want to start on that one?
For me, it starts off right from the beginning. It's a little quote by an adoptee. It said, "Being wanted by my adoptive parents doesn't compare to being unwanted by my birth mother." And I wanted to bring this into one of our discussion questions because do other adoptees feel this way? Do you feel this way?
I actually, when I read this, I was like, I just drew a little heart next to it, and I was like, I bet Erica's gonna think about this too. So I was kind of wondering the same thing. I'm like, I bet this is something that we both feel because I wrote a lot of notes about the fact that when adoptees are told that they're chosen, it's a really hurtful
I hate that term.
trope that, is given. And I know it means well, but this chapter goes into a lot of reasons why that doesn't work.
And in previous ones, I think we've talked about, like, we're not chosen.
No.
We're given up and we're just placed somewhere else.
Exactly. This is the exact reason why is being wanted by my adoptive parents doesn't compare to being unwanted by my birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example of how that comes into play.
Yeah. So I guess we want to hear your take on that as well. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that statement as an adoptee?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we both kind of feel that.
For sure.
So then this is when it gets into kind of the subjects here in each chapter. This starts off as the bad baby syndrome, is basically thinking that you were bad.
Rejected.
And kind of starts talking about the rejection. Did you have much?
I didn't. I highlighted a little part here and I don't know why, honestly.
Do you want to read what you have highlighted?
Sure.
Go for it.
A mother wouldn't give away a good baby. Therefore, I must have been a bad baby. This feeling of having an innate flaw carries over even into adulthood. This sets up adopted children for feelings of failure on every level, where every subsequent rejection, even the slightest one, simple reinforces their belief to innate badness. So I guess after reading it again, I think just feeling failure on every level. I am a perfectionist. I like to make sure things are in control and that I don't fail, even if it's something you have no control over. That it's okay to fail, or it's okay to not get the promotion. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a perfect example, but it's like a failure in my part because I've been rejected before, and it's just like that's how I've been stemmed. So I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah. But
that was the only part I highlighted, but I didn't really talk about it deep in our notes here on our document.
I'm kind of the same way. Yeah, I don't have any notes there. Mm-hmm. Neither with like the next section of the losers and the stoners, thinking that you hang out with people that societal standards would consider to be losers. That like these low people, like people sometimes, or adoptees sometimes associate themselves with those types of groups to kind of be where they believe they belong, which is a problem in so many different ways. I don't even want to go into it because I don't believe any of that. Because a lot of I think the only things that you would maybe have in common with those people is some type of mental health struggle. Mm-hmm. So I think that I'm going to throw that out. I'm not even going to...
I think that's a great point just to end on. Yeah. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfectly
said. Let's move over past that. The next section is talking about testing out, which I was kind of like, what is this talking about? I'm not really entirely sure what this exactly means.
I didn't really have much. I had one part here, just like a brief sentence out of the whole paragraph, which I think just jumped out on me. Yeah.
Go for it.
It said, throughout her life as that of not being loved or liked. So it's kind of in this whole paragraph, but just pretty much saying you worry about not being loved or liked a lot of your time.
Yeah.
And I can definitely attest to that. Like, I'm always trying to please others. Like, I need to think about myself first. And I've definitely done that now, as an adult. But a lot of times when I was younger, I just wanted to please them, make sure they liked me. I didn't want to feel rejected again by friends or other people. So I think that was kind of just an interesting place where that was. But it was a really short little sentence on a big section.
For me in this section, I guess just to give people an idea of what they mean by testing out as well, is basically testing your loved ones to see if they'll drop you, at any moment, given some type of behavior. Like an example maybe being like, you make plans with someone and they're like, they mention something else that they could go to. And you're like, oh, well, it's fine. Mm-hmm. You should go to that. And they'll maybe make that decision, then maybe go because you told them to.
But deep down, you didn't want
them to. You're just like, you feel like you need to give them that option because, number one, they might not want to spend time with you because you're not fun enough for any of those kinds of things. I don't know. I have no words. Or it could be something where it's like testing them then to like see if they're going to...
Their loyalty almost?
Their loyalty, and I think just kind of their ability to drop you like a hat, and... that's kind of the gist that I get from it. I think there's a lot of different versions of that, but kind of testing to see if, I don't know, if there is going to be an easy rejection from these loved ones. The only other part of this section that I underlined and wrote a OMG next to was on page 86. One adoptee says, I can stay in destructive relationships, all right, because that is what I feel I deserve. And I was like, okay, moving on. So, and I mean, I think that that's something as far as, and I'll go into this a little bit more later with our sum up of the chapter, but I don't know, a lot of this chapter I'm realizing that I've never noted, never underlined, that I'm now coming back to a year later, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is me. But it at least, like, it's also, it's productive in the way that I understand why, and I know now. And there's obviously this whole thing is like a learning process.
Just self growth is, I think, where we keep, growing and doing better for ourselves, and just understanding who we are, how other people can support us, and if they can't, letting that go and it being okay.
Yeah. Did you have anything in the rejection and work?
No, and I think that's really interesting. I just put interesting ... because we are both hard workers and we want to work. We want to be the best we can be, perfectionists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I think it's, excuse me, I think it's just interesting that a lot of people are, what they're saying in here is just laziness, and parents are having a hard time getting them up and moving because they fear that rejection and that failure, which I get in some aspects, but I just never had that for myself.
And it's hard to say now. I mean, it's very different being now I'm working and it's not like my parents have anything to do with my job. So it's like, that's kind of a totally separate thing. But yes, I am still a perfectionist. The only section that I really thought was, one of my quotes that I kind of pulled out was that there is a need to be perfect, to be the best, to get one more PhD to prove that one has the right to exist. And I think that that's where I come with being a perfectionist, because I'm like, I'm going to try something, I can't be bad at it. I have to be really good at it. And it's like all the things that I do, I mean, I guess like I've come to like be a perfectionist at, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I learned how to cook like in college, like for example, like I learned how to cook with my friends in college, and then we would do Monday nights where I would watch Bachelor with my friends. I would cook for the group most of the time, and some people would say like, I don't go for the Bachelor, I go for your cooking, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, it's just like that as an example, or like doing these things and like being good at every little thing has always been really important to me. And it's like, it's just really interesting to know like why that rings so true. And in this case with that quote, it's like that one has the right to exist. And I think that's like, that's hard to read, but it's also like, I get it.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Especially at this point. Let's see. Okay, so that was rejection and work.
I think mine ends on the next page. It's right at the top here. It's just it's talking about how adoptees are so sensitive to criticism or even the slightest hint of rejection. It's again another part of a big paragraph, but I just think that those few little words mean so much, because I think personally we are pretty sensitive. Yeah. And I think that's okay. And I'm starting to understand that criticism is good, because I want to keep growing and I want to keep being the best I can be. You can't be a perfectionist and know everything without getting criticized a little bit. So I'm taking that as,
it's constructive criticism.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I am sensitive, and I think that just like pointed out like, oh, here we go, Eric. Like this is another part of where it stems from adoption, where you just are a little bit more emotional in your own self, and that's okay.
And I think when it comes to that kind of thing, like, I don't know, when I've been told that I'm sensitive in a negative kind of way, it's like, when you think of it from the opposite side, it's like, yeah, my friends come to me when they're upset about something because they know I can sympathize.
Yes.
Oh no, like, how dare my sensitivity turn into that? Like, I'm glad. I don't want to be a
Mhm.
stone cold person without emotions.
Yeah, I think I'm like an empath. I think that's what it's
Yeah,
called, where
exactly.
I'm just able
And
to
there's a lot of adoptees that are
read those,
empaths
yeah,
too.
read the energy, be that person.
Yep.
You know, I always get that. I can come to you because I feel comfortable, and that's
And vice versa. Like, I
and
mean,
that feels good for
yeah.
me because that's who I want to be. So
Exactly.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just very interesting of where it stems from.
I think it's also just a part of the learning as we've grown and figured out that that isn't a negative thing.
Right.
That, and same with learning
Yes.
about how to get criticism and have it be okay.
Mhm.
Because I definitely used to have that. I would get more defensive about things, you know, whereas especially when it came to like relationships and how I would react to things, it's like now with just about everything, I think I've gotten a lot more comfortable and a lot better at getting that criticism and being like,
Yeah.
okay, I see what you're saying. I see. And I mean, I think that's also just having to do with the boundaries that I'm enforcing with others as well. It's like,
Mhm.
well, if I'm going to be doing this to them and learning how to set those boundaries and they're having to respond to them, I also need to learn how to respond to them so that they feel welcome to set those boundaries with me.
Very good point.
So it's obviously it has to be a two-way street. And
Mhm.
again, it's like those are the hardest portions is with relationships that you have to hear like, hey, I didn't like the way that you reacted to this and this wasn't constructive. This wasn't helpful. This hurt me.
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z. And
Because that's where like perfectionist comes in again. It's like, wait,
I need to be the best friend ever.
Yeah.
And that's just like your ability to function as a person. It's not being good at math or something.
Mhm.
Where it's
I can't not be good at that. I'm just kidding.
and I'm bad at math.
I'm awful at math. I'm so bad.
So terrible
Give me
at math.
the calculator, please.
They said we'd never have calculators at all times. They were wrong. That's so funny. Okay, so I guess that sums up that section. You said that was kind of it for the top part.
That was.
And then the next section goes into issues of trust and intimacy, which we both had a couple things there. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, mine is in that section. Oh my gosh.
Was it page
the
88?
Second section.
Okay.
Yep, 88. Right at the bottom it said she would rather be rejected herself than do that to someone else. She's used to dealing with rejection and can handle it. And I think that is interesting in relationships because I feel like even just friendships, not even physical, you know, like loving relationships. Is that the right word? Loving relationships.
Romantic relationships.
Thank you. Just like if someone did wrong to her, she just wouldn't want to, or we wouldn't want to reject them because we know what that's like. Like, well, let's give them a second chance. Maybe they were going through this. Again, that give and pull, but like you never want to hurt them, but you've been hurt so many times.
Mm-hmm. Which I think kind of goes back to that original part of the chapter where it's like, well, I stay in these bad relationships because I think it's what I deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Like those go in tandem, at least for me.
Yeah, but we deserve so much more. Like people,
and everyone does.
Isn't that just so?
Like I can give out that relationship advice till the date is done, but when it comes to me, I'm like, well, like it's like you get an 8th chance. Like it's just you know. And again, I guess it kind of goes back to the fact that like a year ago, I guess full disclosure, I was in a relationship a year ago. I'm not anymore, and it's like that's a very different scope to be looking at this through and seeing these kinds of things. It's, you know, taking off the rose-colored glasses.
It's eye-opening for you.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that's really interesting too, is like, because I think that that's a very common thing for adoptees, for a lot of other people who've gone through trauma, but like,
and maybe that stems back to the abandonment again. You just don't want to be alone. So you'd rather be with hurt.
Exactly. Yeah, you'd rather be in something that's with someone than not at all.
And I think that's why I would just always want to be around people, like friends, even if it was like not a great friendship. I'd just be like, well, someone I can be with, you know, they kind of want me here. Like, what?
Yeah.
No, you're talking stuff behind my back. Like, that's not a friendship.
Right. Yeah, those are other things to have to like navigate, and friendships are hard because it's, I think, less hard start, hard finish when it comes to friendships, unless there is like a friend breakup, which happens.
Very good point
I've
too.
I've been through those, but it's like friendships are so, it's normal when they're not off and on, but when you have those times, and like I love those friendships when you can have time apart and not have it affect you. And it's like, hey, we get together after not talking for 3 months, and it's great.
And that's a good friendship. That's
a
perfect.
Great friendship, like, because that's realistic as adults, especially.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Gosh, that's so interesting. I feel like this is getting me thinking about so many different things than when I was reading this on my couch at home.
Well, then the next, me too. And then the next little section is just about there's this general feeling of not trusting girls or women just because you have a hard.
Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you just have a hard time trusting or building that relationship with your adoptive mother. You just see women as
the enemy,
essentially.
Yeah.
And it's not like I had like a bunch of guy friends, because I definitely did, and I was in sports with a lot of girls, and that was who I hung out with. I never really hung out with just guys, which I know some people do, but I can definitely see where that happens too. It's just like, just kind of like with our fathers, it's just like that's an easy thing. It's just laid back. There's not all that cattiness or drama or, oh, am I good enough for her, or do I look good enough right now for being in this friend group, whatever it is, like all of those layers of having to, again, be perfect and trying not to break those walls down because you want to be, I don't know, looked at looked at a certain way.
Right. That's really interesting. And I think, because for me at first when I was reading this, I kind of kind of went back to the same thing where I was like, well, I wasn't always like hanging out with the guys. That was not me.
Yeah.
I was in theater. There was like one guy.
Yeah.
It was like one guy per show. Yes, I was friends with them. And like, that's, definitely something that I have now. But it's like, yeah, the majority of my friends are women. However, the standard that I hold my female friends to is probably such a high standard compared to what they might hold me to, or at least quietly to myself. And that's kind of where like the hurt comes in and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that I've kind of more realized in the last year or two.
It's good to vocalize that.
Yeah.
Just so people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And it's just like, because the hurt comes from somewhere. It's not just because I'm possessive, because it's like, it's not like I'm like, you have other friends. It's like, that's not me at all. But it's, I think previously, but when I wasn't aware of this, it was like, I don't know, just holding them to this really, really high standard that I don't know. I guess it's just kind of hard to describe, but that's kind of the note here that I have for this section. Again, the section is titled Distrust of the Feminine. So, I mean, there definitely are people that are going to like, adoptees identifying as male that may gravitate more towards men anyway, which is, I guess, more commonly, I don't want to say accepted, but more run-of-the-mill kind of situation. And then with those who identify as female adoptees may, go more towards male friends. And again, going back to what we've said about having relationships with our dads, it's like, it's definitely there,
Absolutely.
Let's see.
Did you have anything in difficulties in separating?
Yes, that was actually where I had talking about, let's see, I'm trying to decide where to start.
Because this is kind of tying back into everything. Like,
it ties all of it together, which really helped me kind of like pull it all together at the very end. And I think one section that you had, let's see, difficulties in separating. This is page 90. One thing that I had noted was like the very first relationship, as in very first relationship you've ever had, i.e. the one that you had with your birth mother. Like the very first relationship, it will not last. And essentially it goes into, so why attach? And I get that, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And that quote that I underlined last year said, and part of it I've done twice, once a relationship is established, many adoptees do not want to separate, even when the relationship proves unsatisfactory.
I have that highlighted too. It just goes back to what we were just talking about.
Exactly. It's like, well, it's either a relationship that's giving me 30% effort or I get 0. Which doesn't make any sense.
That's all I had in that one, but that's a bold statement right there.
And
that sums it up.
It's not
honestly.
unreasonable. These are learned, reactions, essentially. It's not just I don't know. It's not just something that you're like, oh, I don't like this type of person or this blah, 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 blah because
Right.
of some unknown bias. It's for a reason. It's
Mm-hmm.
learned. So that's kind of where I go back to that. Let's see. Let's see. I have those unworthy. Did you have anything in distrusting of the self?
I was
Or
just
distrusting the
looking
self?
at that, and yes, I had kind of this first paragraph fully boxed out, but just the main part again, I like to just pull out little sentences in the paragraph just because I think it's easy for me to talk about quickly on our podcast, but also just things that really stuck out to me was this lack of self-esteem or self-worth is intertwined with the lack of trust or fear of intimacy described by many adoptees, whom this lady has spoken to. And I just think I struggled completely with this, just the lack of self-esteem and self-worth is something that I have just tried to grew out of and trying to grow still, just that even relationships, friendships, just myself with my family, just trying to being the best I can be. It was just a little bit hard for me to have full confidence.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. For me, in this particular paragraph, or the section of distrusting the self, it goes back to one mention of a previous chapter. First stating, if my own mother couldn't love me, who can? And then your basically, hold on, I'm trying to figure out like what exactly this is said. One of the adoptees states, her name's Denise, says, if my own mother couldn't love me, who can? And then goes on to say, reassuring her that her mother did love her isn't helpful because it brings up the non sequitur, your mother really loved you, so she gave you up. Which is what we talked about before, where it's when we've discussed love equals abandonment. And
I just said, can we reword this, please? I literally just wrote that. Like,
I was like, wait, this is written weird.
She gave you up. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it just, and again, that I think that really, I can understand if someone says like, if my own mother didn't love me or couldn't love me, who can?
How can I love myself?
Yeah, it's like that reassurance doesn't mean squat, because it's like when you say your mother really, really, really loved you, so she did this. It's like those aren't helpful whatsoever. I guess with that particular section, I hope we do have some, adoptive parents that are reading along, listening along, so that these kinds of things can be removed from that vocabulary.
Yeah.
I don't know with these types of groups that adoptive parents are part of, if this is something that's brought up and talked about and encouraged. I'd be curious to know that.
I would too.
Because I think those hold a lot more weight than I think people realize.
Oh, for sure.
A lot more. Because, I mean, we didn't realize it until we read it and we're like, that's it! It's right there!
So, we need to make a shirt that says love equals abandonment.
And then with the X in between with the equal sign. Ooh.
Working on it.
I'm working on it.
Divided loyalty. Did you have anything, or just in the
loyalty
section?
The only thing I had in the divided loyalty was the phrase, she is my daughter, but I am not her only mother.
Yes, I underlined that too.
Made me think of Kate.
I literally wrote that. I said, reminds me of Kate, 2 moms.
Oh my God, shout out to Kate.
And you keep coming back in our podcast, and we love you.
We love you so much.
That was such a great episode.
That was amazing.
Check that out if you haven't.
Yeah, check it out.
And then I also have loyalty to the lost child. I think this was the second question I wanted to bring up in our discussion. It's going to be on page 92. Okay. It just said, I felt unworthy to be a mother after giving my firstborn away. It would be disloyal to her to have another baby. So I'm just wondering if you are adopted and either have searched or not searched, more pertaining if you searched and found out you have other siblings, how does that make you feel? And I think, like, I don't even know the answer for myself, because
I was going to say, how does it make you feel?
I do have a brother in Colombia, and he's only 2 years younger than me.
Whoa. Well, that's a thinker.
I know, so I'm just kind of like, okay. I know, like, the situation's a lot better. I mean, his father's still in both of their lives. He didn't have another family. I know that, circumstances around that was a lot different, but it also made me, like, take a step back, like, whoa. So you could still I mean, raising a child in itself is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you could still do that for him, but not for me. It was just kind of like one of those felt sad, felt mad, I'm over it now.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wonder how other people feel. Or how do you feel like not doing the search? Like, what if you did have brothers and sisters out there? Like, how would you feel about that? Can you even feel something real?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can even say because I'm like, okay, it is what I don't know anyway.
Yeah.
So it kind of just doesn't mean much to me. But
that's what I was thinking.
I do also want to bring to light just the fact that, like, if it was something as short as 2 years for myself, I'd be like, look at how much my life has changed in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
How much more could I handle 2 years ago versus now?
Excellent point.
How much could I handle now versus 2 years from now? Hopefully more.
Right. And she was 19 to 21 is a very big difference too.
I mean, do you remember when you were, I don't even want to remember when I was 19. But like the things that oh God, either way, with having a child at 19 or 21, I'm 28, almost 29, and I'm still like, no, I could not. There's no way. Like, that sounds crazy.
Give it 2 years.
No! Can't make me.
But that's a really good point.
Perspective, though. If I could, I can't. But still, it's like putting 2 years into perspective with yourself of what you did handle 2 years ago, what you're handling now versus what you can handle in 2 more years. It's like, I guess I'm always trying to rationalize certain things to make myself feel better. So it's like,
come on now, that's totally me.
So it's like we have that at least. It's like, all right, think of it that way so that it's not just, bogging down your mind and being like, well, they could do it for this kid, not me. It's like, what's that about? It's like, well, different circumstances.
That's exactly where you have to. And of course, it might hurt like for a second, but again, like I said, I'm over it because
and it might be something that people do deal with, and it does hurt for a longer period of time, and that's okay. It's just like realizing that that's whether you rationalize it or not, and you can rationalize it or not, still something that's worth talking about and worth getting help over or something like that, where you can, talk to people about it and figure out what would help you.
Correct. And I'm such a strong believer on what's meant to happen will happen. And like, this is my journey and I just have to embrace where I'm at. So
exactly.
I just couldn't imagine even living there. So like, why even think about that
being
situation?
There, yeah, exactly.
And being sad over it. So yeah, I overall feel okay about that. I guess on this chapter, we're kind of at the end unless you had anything else.
That's really all that I had. I guess overall then, how did the chapter make you feel?
I think for me,
or I guess do you want me to?
No, I can just like agree with you later.
Sneak peek, we have notes and
just cut that part out.
No. We're experiencing an earthquake.
Earthquake! Freaky Friday, which is such a good movie.
Could you like chill for a sec?
Yeah.
I used that gift today at work. It was great.
Okay.
Anyway.
So how did this chapter make me feel? I think it made me feel that I'm validated again in those feelings of not fitting in or just struggling with my own self-esteem issues. Just might have stemmed from something deeper than I even really thought about, kind of just through my adoption. So I think that made me feel a little bit better for my past self, like my teenage years of that was okay.
Did you notice as much as I did as far as like highlighting now versus last year with this chapter?
This was the chapter I did. This is as far as I got. So this is my first time reading it.
Oh,
I know.
Wow, you got actually quite a bit highlighted.
I know.
I love it. For me, just gonna be totally blatantly honest. What this chapter made me think of was the fact that I'm always the one to end relationships.
Yes.
They're never
Lisa,
good either, so they end and I feel relieved.
That is
I've
so
never
mean.
once been dumped.
Me neither.
I've never really
because we're the shit. Oh, sorry, Mom.
And I've never really been like left heartbroken or something, or I don't know. Again, I've always like any type of romantic relationship I've ever had, it's ended and I've been like, okay, we're good.
Dodged a bullet on that one.
Dodged a bullet there. And though, like, and yet it's because I'm in these bad relationships that like there's part of it that I think probably goes back to like being like this is what I deserve. This is as much as I deserve. Mm-hmm. And again, like I'm great at, you know, dishing out the relationship advice to people and be like, don't stand for this. Like you need to ask for more. You need to blah blah blah. Blah. And it's like that's obviously always so easy to give out and then really hard to take for yourself.
Why do you think you attract, maybe not even attract, but like, do you just not set the standards right away where things can start slipping in here and there? Like, I think that's just another good point. Like, why does this keep happening? Not like you've had like a bunch of relationships and they're all trash. It's not like that at all. But I mean,
they're all trash. But
well,
it's not like I haven't been one to like date a ton. It's always just been like longer term relationships that are longer than they should be, and they've all been like, it should have ended 6 months before it did. Pretty much 100%, if not more.
Does it go back for you? Does it go towards abandonment? Like just being left
I think it's
alone?
Just like once I'm comfortable with being, again, it's kind of being like, well, if I'm getting 30% from this person, that's better from 0% from no one. But yet at the same time, it's like, it's really just the process of that detachment that I fear. Because when it's happening and when it's leading up to it, I'm like, I have a physical reaction to it. I always have like stomach aches prior to these things every single time. And then when it finally happens, I'm like, all right, ding dong, the witch is dead. Like it's
here comes the buffet. Like.
It's like, I'm fine. It's all good.
Yeah.
And I'm my best self afterwards. Every single time. So it's
so
like
interesting.
So it's like, and I don't know, I'm also trying to break that pattern. So
you can find Risa
at Risa without her spoon. No, I probably won't like you anyway.
She's funny. I mean,
I'm funnier than you. Better cook than you.
You know our traumas by this point if you're watching this. Just listen to us as people and as adoptees. She's single, 28.
God.
Doesn't want kids in 2 years, so if that's you, likes older men.
I feel like
you got a beard.
Oh my God, Eric.
We're taking applications.
I finally understand the dad on Billboard, Dad and Mary-Kate and Ashley, because he was mortified by his daughters, and I feel like you're MKing it right now, and I'm like,
I still think you need to go on The Bachelor.
Oh my God, that's a
I'm about
thing
to sign
for
you
another
up.
day.
I'm about to just
right
sign
now.
You up.
Eric is about to
We're
sign
done.
up for The Bachelor as we speak.
That's the end of this.
I could never say, will you accept this rose? There's no way. I'd be like, hey, will you accept this hamburger? It's really good. I made it.
You have to switch it up. Well, I was
this
gonna
has
say,
gone in a really weird direction.
I was gonna say Chris would be having to.
Well,
who knows? I don't know. Dun, dun, dun. That's a whole nother episode.
Anyway, I guess that kind of concludes though chapter 7. Unless you wanted to go into the discussions again, just to name those one more time for our page.
Go for it.
All right. So we kind of touched on these earlier in the episode, but basically for these discussions, the discussion questions that we're going to post on our pages, going back to the quote, being wanted by my adoptive parents doesn't compare to being unwanted by my birth mother. Do other adoptees feel this way? And then I felt unworthy to be a mother after giving my firstborn away. It would be disloyal to her to have another baby. If you are adopted and have searched for your biological family and found out you have other brothers and sisters from your birth mom, how does that make you feel? So report back, make some comments. As always, like, subscribe, share our pages. Again, leave us comments, leave us reviews, ratings and reviews on our podcast platforms. And check out our website, colombianinfluence.com.
COLOMBIAN.com.
We have a lot of resources up there. If you do have resources that you are looking into that's helpful to you as an adoptee, please send them our way.
Yes.
We're trying to just build that library so that it's helpful for other people. You can also find the Primal Wound in our bookshop on our website in the resources as well, so you can read along with us and let us know what your thoughts are on this chapter. Until next time.
Later.
Bye.
My eyelashes were sticking together after like the whole last little part. I was just like